make or unmake any legislation whatsoever. Any of it. We could turn ourselves into a fascist dictatorship. We could turn ourselves into the communist state that we're rapidly becoming, and all of that would be legal as long as the Parliament wants to do it. So the problem is that the Bill of Rights still exists, okay? And so this is why you need to appeal to your Bill of Rights when you're dealing with the federal government. Because for so long as the Bill of Rights exists, you still have rights with respect to not being arbitrarily detained, to not being tortured or subjected to cruel or inhumane treatment, even if a state of emergency is declared. The Bill of Rights is binding legislation that the federal government under Trudeau had the option of unmaking, and this goes back to the 1715 Septennial Act as observed by the late William Blackstone centuries ago, that Parliament has the right and the capacity to make or unmake any legislation. Pierre Trudeau didn't unmake the Bill of Rights because it would have been an optical kind of problem for him. So that still exists, so you still have those rights. However, in most courts of law, they're accustomed to case law referring to the Charter. So hopefully in the matters that I'm dealing with in Supreme Court, we can reestablish our rights under the Bill of Rights and enjoy our freedoms once again. So if there's no questions, I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Now, our next speaker has come all the way from Vancouver, so please give him a very strong, warm welcome. He has asked to introduce himself. I will tell you his name, although I don't see it on the sheets that were given me here. Oops. Oops. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So this gentleman has got a large alphabet after his name. There's masters in chemistry and science, and I believe he's a professor of vascular surgery at the UBC and consultant surgeon at the Vancouver General Hospital in Vancouver. Born in Taiwan, educated in the States, New Zealand, and Canada, Dr. Sang has diverse interests in vascular engineering and biology, lasers, etc. Very smart guy, in other words. Please welcome Dr. Sang.
Thank you very much, and hello everybody, and thank you very much for this fantastic Victoria welcome. You know, it kind of reminds you of Vancouver. So I'm York Shum. I was a licensed physician and surgeon. I was a vascular surgeon, and if that sounds exotic, it is. So I was one of 25 vascular surgeons in BC, and I was the only full professor of vascular surgery at UBC. I have since left that because I always felt, and I told our trainees, that you always need to do the right thing. And so when the time came, I did the right thing for myself. I said, I don't want any part of this, and I left it all. I left it all to form a group of physicians, such as Dr. Malthouse, who didn't believe in any of this, the Canadian Society for Science and Ethics in Medicine. And we have a judicial review that will be heard on November the 20th this year. The judicial review is asking whether Dr. Bonnie Henry is still reasonable to say that we are living in an emergency, and it's still reasonable to keep unvaccinated healthcare workers on the sidelines not working. So we look forward to our day in court.
Thank you.
What I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today is your doctor. Now, I know some of you are kind of disappointed with your doctor if you can get a doctor, but I thought that we should show them some love. And I thought that we, in fact, should talk about sympathy for your doctor.
Who yelled that?
What did he say?
No more sympathy.
Have sympathy for your doctor. I'm not finished yet. If they believe
This is a good speech.
that in fact Dr. Bentley Henry is the top doctor in BC for the last 3 years running. Have sympathy for your doctor if they believe Adrian Dix is a doctor and knows something about medicine. Have sympathy for your doctor if they believe that Adrian Dix's idea
Yeah.
that nurses and doctors are all the same, completely interchangeable,
This random thing. I don't know what that's.
and that there are nurses and doctors growing on trees somewhere that they can easily pluck and bring them all to BC. Have sympathy for your doctors because they have never heard of Bill 36. Have sympathy for your doctors that they never read the emails from the doctors of BC about Bill 36.
So like when it's over. It's crazy.
Have sympathy for your doctors if they do not believe that Bill 36 could possibly harm them. Have sympathy for your doctors because they believe they are professionals. And if they have never done anything wrong before, no harm can come to them.
I'm gonna put these on my backpack.
Have sympathy for your doctors as they believe that their college is looking out for them, although the board of the college will be completely replaced by elected members designed to protect the public from the dastardly doctors. Have sympathy for your doctors because their association, the Doctors of BC, is actually concerned for their welfare, whereas the Doctors of BC have been completely penetrated by government over the last 10 years. Have sympathy for your doctor because they still believe that they are a most respected profession and serving you, and that you will continue to listen. And believe them.
Demonstrate something. Oh, okay. When you were on.
I think that's where all the sympathy should end. And I think that you should educate your doctors. You should bring forward to them what you know as to what's going on. Tell them about Bill 36, the things that will happen to them. Educate them about vaccines. I think that the doctors are overworked. Their replacements are not coming. I think it's up to us to educate our doctors and keep them all before they all leave. Thank you very much.
So our last speaker today is James Jones. He was actually in the documentary by Todd. He gonna knock me out. He's the loving widower of Sandra James, and he was in the film Uninformed Consent by Todd Harris. Has overcome great diversity, which has gotten him to a place where he is speaking out to help and inform others. Please help me welcome our anchor today, Mr. James Jones.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I don't want to go deep into it, but my wife, she worked for BC Transit. She was a bus driver there. She worked for them for 14 years. And when they chose to mandate the COVID shots, she decided she wasn't going to do it. There wasn't enough information. She knew something was fishy about it. She was onto it before I ever was, to be honest. She was in every way my better half, to be honest with you. And yeah, so I spent 6 months trying to investigate the whole thing, and we tried every different exemption one could try. Legal exemption, ethical exemption, medical reasoning. We were looking to have a child together, and we didn't know how it affected pregnancy. And There were so many other things. And she tried a religious exemption. And for each and every one of those she tried, they just blocked her, they obstructed her. She was the head of their anti-bullying and harassment training. She would do that. Every new employee who would start there had to go through that training. And she left a log. The last 6 months of her life, she experienced some of the most ruthless, brutal bullying that I've ever even heard of. So on November 30th, they took her job away from her. She'd worked 14 years to earn that career and built that company for them in many ways. It was instrumental in doing so. And she, looking back on it so hard, I guess, I didn't really see it at the time. I thought we had a great future ahead of us. She would have been a wonderful warrior standing here amongst us today. But they denied her EI and they removed all of the social safety nets that are there to protect us in that kind of situation. And 11 days later, she took her own life. I was working night shift at the time. It was just something I walked into or whatever. I'll never get that image out of my mind or that moment. I don't know if I'll ever move past it. It's been a year and 8 months for me, and in some ways it feels like yesterday. I promised myself I'd hold it together. I'm sorry. No, give me a second. Let me finish this because I don't want to lose momentum. I don't want it to stall out. Yeah, the reason I'm standing here is her, and the reason I do everything I do in my life was her. And there's a lot of it I can't explain. Like when you lose somebody that you built a life with or that you've shared a life with, you have all these little intimate moments between you and these little things, these little in-jokes that only the two of you understand. And it's true with families, it's true with your wives and your husbands and your sons and your daughters and your parents. And when you lose somebody like that, you lose all of those things. And you're the only person who understands. You're left. It's like being crazy, right? The definition of it is like living in a world where you feel you're the only one who understands your reality and everybody else who looks from outside of that can't grasp it, can't understand it. And losing someone that close to you is like that. It's like going crazy. It's like losing a large part of what makes you you. Yeah, but that's, I don't want to go deep into it. That's just, that's not what I came here to say. I came here to say in a lot of ways that it was each and every one of you, the people who are so strong that you're here today, almost 2 years later, still standing up, still showing your backbone to this, still resisting, still fighting, and all the great speakers who spoke here today. It's you guys who've given me hope. Without those Saturdays, that we would all come here and stand on this legislature, because my wife took her life on December 11th, and the truckers' rebellion happened maybe 2 weeks later. And I can't help but think that if she would have seen that, would have understood and seen that unity and seen all those people, that she would have, maybe it would have given her the hope that she needed to hold on, right? And I want you to know that each and every one of you, that you were all that hope to me. You are the reason that I am still here and that I continue to fight. Yes. Thank you.
Don't worry, these guys are really quiet. Thank you.
So, one of the things I said when Todd interviewed me was that societies grow great when men and women plant trees that they themselves know that they won't stand in the shade of, right? When they plant trees for the next generations to come. And ever since I was a boy, I looked at things like the national debt and all these other things they would talk about, and just watched them continue to spend beyond their means, spend into deficit and accrue this debt. And it felt like the only tree that we were planting for next generation was a tree of debt, a tree of usury, debt slavery for these people. And in my life, I've watched the housing market grow to the grasp of the average person. People become wage slaves and have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to put food in their children's mouths. And hope taken from people. People lied to about things like climate change to the point where they've lost hope and they don't even want to further their own families and generations. And the government seems all too willing to replace them with immigration. And I have nothing wrong against people coming to this country and making it their home. We can all unify and be Canadians together. But at the same time, people who come here and immigrate, the one thing that they all, I think, have in common is that they're beholden to the government. They're looking to the government for their citizenship. And so they're jumping through hoops and they're doing what the government tells them. And all of us who are here to resist We expect the government to work for us, to represent us, right? And that's why they're so happy to replace us, because they don't want people who are willing to resist. They don't want people who are willing to stand up to them and expect them to be public servants as they are sworn to be, right? The other thing I was thinking is, I looked into the CBC, and the CBC was formed, so CBC News came about in 1941. And it was actually brought about in a lot of ways to sort of talk about the war, entering into World War II, to kind of discuss the pros and the cons of it. And if we look back at that or whatever, I don't know how much of what I've been told is propaganda, because so much of this is propaganda. And it's not like lying is a new thing for this government or for their media corporations. One of the things I thought about was the internment camps that they put the Japanese in, right? It wasn't the average Canadian people who was responsible for that. We were happy to accept those Japanese people into our culture, happy to accept their immigration here. But when a war broke out and Japan was on the other side of that war, there was a famous tea house actually here in Victoria, I read, that the family who owned it was a Japanese family, and they had that tea house taken from them. They had their property appropriated. They were put in internment camps by the government. Right? The government claims to serve the moral high ground and calls us everything that doesn't stand for their agenda. They call right-wing extremism. Now wanting to have parental choice in how you raise your children is somehow right-wing extremism. It won't be long before everything is right-wing extremism, right? You won't be able to leave your house without being a right-wing extremist. It's nonsense, right? By making these arguments, they take the wind out of their sails. They take the power out of their own arguments. They disarm themselves of the moral high ground that they would try to occupy. And it's the same is true with the residential schools. None of that was perpetrated by the average Canadian person. And the same people who are standing here against this today are the same people who, if you went back, would have stood against those residential schools. They would have stood against Japanese people being put in internment camps. And the same people who are apologists for the government, the same people who are their soldiers, would have been the ones claiming that it was necessary, claiming that it had to be that way, or arguing for residential schools, arguing for the internment of those Japanese Canadian citizens. Right? Hindsight's 20/20. And we look back on all those things and we realize how wrong each and every one of them is. And it will be the same with this. You are right. No, it doesn't matter what the government calls you, because the government has always called those who oppose it names and slandered them and tried to disarm them through language, right? And I respect every one of you. I respect you all for being here. I didn't really plan a speech or any of this, and I don't really know. Thank you. There's so much I want to say, but okay. Thank you all. And I know that the numbers of this group have diminished in some path, like we don't have the 10,000, but this is the core of the group, and you'll be the core of the next resistance, because this isn't over, and the government's not done pushing or bullying us and seeing how far they can get away with this. And the one thing I would say is that Todd's right, and Dr. Malthouse is right, and everyone who spoke today is right about what they said. Forgiveness is hard for me, right? I lost everything. It's hard for me to stand in front of you knowing that although I've suffered the worst thing that I could ever suffer, that the worst is behind me, that the loss of my wife is behind me, and that whatever comes could never be as bad as that was. But at the same time, I also stand here with the knowledge that the best years of my life are behind me, because my wife gave me those years, and we spent those years together. And it's so hard for me to know that as much as the worst is behind, so is the best. And so it's up to me to make myself who I can be for this. It's up to me to live towards a better future for others, and to make sure what happened to my wife can never happen to anyone else ever again, right? Yeah, and none of you deserve that. I know you've all suffered, and I know you've all shared in this loss, and that I'm not the only one standing here who's lost and been cost because of this, and who's been bullied and who felt hopeless at times, right? And that's totally natural. And the fact that you're here today shows the strength in each and every one of you, right? And we have to be willing to welcome those outside of this with open arms. It doesn't matter what their standpoints are, because as the government pushes this austerity, as they push this imposed poverty on people, more and more people are going to turn away from the government. They're going to realize that they themselves do not hold the solutions that we as people need. And we need to welcome them with open arms, right? It's like that corny ass movie, The Field of Dreams, that if you build it, they will come. And we need to be the ones who start to build it, because if we don't build some measure of parallel society, then they'll have nowhere to go. They'll be like my wife, where they'll feel isolated and hopeless. and that, you know, we can't lose more people. We don't know who the next revolutionary speakers will be, fighters will be. They could be people who buy this hook, line, and sinker today and have just yet to wake up. And we can't judge them or hold it against them or act with resentment, because we have to be better than that. When they go low, we need to go high, right?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'll try to finish up with the one thing I think that I could maybe mention, and I don't know how to achieve this, but maybe you can all work with me, is that as much as I love protests and I love doing the marches, I love walking through these streets and making ourselves recognized and making our voices heard to all of these people. And until each and every time people would be yelling at us, flipping us off, acting with anger and vitriol. And as weeks progressed, they started to realize that maybe we were right, and our numbers continue to grow and grow. And we need to celebrate our freedom. We fought hard for it. Each and every one of you has fought hard for it. We need to find a way that we can all get together, not just in the guise of protest and not just in the guise of resistance, but in the guise of celebration, right? And through that celebration and music and art, because art is resistance, right? Through celebrating that art and sharing that together, we will bring more people into this movement. There are those who maybe aren't motivated by protest, and that's fine. Maybe that's not something that they've really got in their heart yet. But everybody is motivated and brought together by celebration. Nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd, right? Yeah. So maybe let's all work on that in the next year, right? In the coming year, it gives a goal to everybody in our hearts, right? Let's try to come up with ways that we can all celebrate. And when people see us celebrating our freedom and see us enjoying that fun and that enjoyment together and sharing in what we've worked hard to maintain and what we've worked hard to stave off this oppression, that we will see people come to us, we'll unite, and we'll bring more people. And then maybe next year we'll see twice as many or 3 times as many people joining us on these lawns, just like this. All right? I love you all. Right? Thank you. And thank you all. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, James. And again, you guys are that activated minority, which throughout history is all we need to overcome things. You are the fringe minority with unacceptable views, but you're my kind of people. So just to close off, we're going to have Réjean come up and polish off one last song. Hey, thank you so much to Heather, who set everything up, to all the speakers, and all of you guys, because you're the reason this is working and this is going to go forward. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day.